Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Masters of the Universe ReAction He-Man and Battle Cat and Skeletor and Panthor box sets from Super7. Pretty cool stuff. So I've actually found the ReAction lineup a lot of fun from Super7. They've done a ton of properties, but of course Masters of the Universe being one of them. And if you are completely unfamiliar with ReAction at this point, essentially what this is a vintage, almost Kenner-styled lineup of 3 3/4 inch action figures that only feature 5 points of articulation. They're done in that retro styling on purpose. So this is sort of like reimagining the beefed up 5.5 inch Masters of the Universe figures as if they were instead released as 3 3/4 inch Kenner style figures. That's what we've got going on here. And these are really unique because this will be our first time getting some bigger characters, being the Beasts, Battle Cat, and Panthor in the line. On top of that, it sounds like this might be the final Masters of the Universe ReAction release from Super7, since we know now that Mattel is producing a Masters of the Universe line starting later this year. It sounds like Super7 has wrapped things up with the brand. I don't know that for certain, but it definitely sounded that way when they put these up for sale kind of by surprise, and they called these their final Masters of the Universe release. So really interesting stuff there. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at these. First of all, I got to talk about the packaging. That's one thing that Super7 does incredibly well with the ReAction figures, is the amazing packaging with the beautiful artwork. So you can see these come in window boxes, very similar to what you would have seen like the vintage Star Wars toys coming in. But the tops there have this absolutely gorgeous artwork. So you can see we've got He-Man riding Battle Cat. We've got Skeletor riding Panthor. It's really cool because that part of it, that aspect with the artwork, really evokes what we would see on the boxes of the vintage Masters of the Universe line. It is all new artwork. It matches up with the other artwork we've seen for the ReAction card backs. Just absolutely beautiful packaging. And since it's a window box where you can see everything inside, I could totally see collectors buying these and keeping these mint in box like this, because these are really, really slick. So the sides of the boxes there have that same artwork, and when you look at the back of the boxes there, it just has kind of that vintage style cross-sell of He-Man, Battle Cat, Skeletor, Panthor, so you can see those actually look like the vintage Mattel cross-sells. But then you got a checklist showing all the various ReAction figures, which is really, really cool. So yeah, gorgeous packaging, but why don't we go ahead and rip these open? Let's take a closer look at the figures within. All right, we got our cats outside of the packaging. Let me go ahead and start with the tape measure. You can see the figures here themselves, right at that 3 3/4 inch mark. They're just shy of 4 inches. The cats stand a little over 4 inches if you count the back of their saddle. They're pretty much right about that same height. And lengthwise, you can see they're about a full 6 inches long from back of the tail to the front of the head. So appropriately scaled with your ReAction style Masters of the Universe figures, because these are essentially the steeds of Eternia, with He-Man and Skeletor riding on their cats. Let's go ahead and start and look at the two ReAction figures. So He-Man and Skeletor have had a few reissues already, but one of the things that Super7 always does really well is they usually have differences in the colors, and I can definitely see that with He-Man here. You can see he's got shiny silver on the harness. He's got shiny gold on the wrist bracers and the belt. And I don't think those colors have been used before in this combination. The sword even almost has like this gunmetal kind of shine to the plastic. So they're really nice. The figures feel really quality made. If you've had any of the ReAction figures, again, it's just a simple 5 points of articulation. You know, they are made to look like vintage Kenner figures. So the way they look is done that way on purpose, but they're very solid and they're well painted figures. Same with Skeletor here. You can see he's got the black furry underpants, but he's got like the purple belt harness over that, the purple armor. He's got the bright green around the yellow of his face with the red glowing eyes, and he's got the full painted boots. So you could probably compare those to your past releases, but these are the ones that do come packaged with the cats. So let's move these aside, because we got to talk about the stars of the show. We're going to talk about these cats. These are awesome. I got to say, I really like the look of these. I think they did a good job of kind of translating the look of the vintage Mattel cats into sort of this Kennerized style. It's really, really neat. You can see the colors are bright and vibrant. The armor on Battlecat is that same kind of maroon we saw in the vintage toy. He's got the nice bright yellow stripes on his green fur. And here's something really nice. Articulation, guys. Look at that. You can move all of the legs independently, forwards and backwards. Of course, their feet are molded so that there's really only one way they can stand, but they do articulate, much like the beasts from the Kenner Star Wars line, and the tail swivels. So that's actually one up on the vintage Battlecat, because that one had a whopping 0 points of articulation. This one you can actually move the legs and the tail around. And in case you were wondering, you can remove the helmet and the saddle. So look at that. The helmet does come off. Now, the helmet's made of a bit of a pliable material, and it also, it sits fine on the head, but it's a bit loose. Now, luckily, it's not like it's fallen off, and that's probably because it's that softer material, so it is kind of form-fitting on the head, but it doesn't really snap on or anything like that. You can see it's very easy to take on and off. But like I said, not falling off, so that's definitely a positive. The saddle here has just a little tab. You can unhook. We can pop the saddle off. And now we are left with our unarmored Battlecat, or Cringer, however you want to do it. That's what we've got going on there. Now, we keep talking about how these are very similar to what we saw in the Kenner Star Wars line. So think about things like the Tauntaun and the Dewback. When we're talking about figures that need to ride on their beasts, how do they do that since they've only got 5 points of articulation and the legs only move forwards and backwards? Well, there's these little trap doors on the top, just like the vintage Tauntaun and Dewback. So that is kind of fun. So that saddle, you can see there's a hole right there in the top of that saddle. So let me put this back on here real quick. I want to show you how we would seat He-Man on the back of his cat. See if we can get them all armored up. You can see there's that hole. You got that little trap door right there. So if you bring your He-Man, just kind of push his feet down. You can slide his legs forward, and that's basically it right there. He's almost standing. He's kind of half-seated, and that is how we put our He-Man on the top of Battlecat. Now, we're comparing these to the vintage Tauntaun and the Dewback. Those actually had molded, unpainted legs on the saddles, so that when you slid the figure in, there was some semblance of legs. And Battlecat and Panthor do not have that. I don't know if that was a conscious decision that Super7 made because they didn't like the way it looked. They thought it might have broke up the sculpt. I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm kind of two minds of it. Because on one hand, that always looked goofy to me. But on the other hand, if you want to be accurate, that's the way it probably should have been done. So I don't know. That's going to be completely up to you and your tastes. But it is worth noting that their legs basically just kind of disappear because they go inside the cats. So let's move Battlecat out of the way. Let's bring Panthor over. Seriously, he's done the same as Battlecat. I think he's probably even the same mold, just like in the vintage line. But you guys, he's flocked. Exactly how Panthor should be, right? Something that I still feel like the Masters of the Universe Classics Panthor got totally wrong all those years ago. Panthor deserves to be flocked. This guy is nicely flocked. It is wonderful. You got that nice fuzzy purple feel going on there. One thing that's, again, nicer than the vintage one, he actually has molded eyes that are painted yellow rather than his face being totally flocked over and having those weird yellow paint marks on top of the flock that didn't always look that good. So this looks a little more pronounced, a little bit better. Saddle is the same as Battlecat's, but it's that darker green in color. So again, we can pop that off. We can have, our unsaddled Panthor here. He's got the same trapdoor now. While I've got this off, I want to show you something with this, because this is something that you do need to be warned about. Especially with Skeletor. His feet are a little bit bigger and they're shaped weirder than He-Man's, and it actually makes it a little hard to get his feet inside the cat and you get him seated. I mean, look, it's a struggle. You can do it, but it's a struggle. And unfortunately, just from me doing that a few times to take photos before I filmed, I've really scratched up the top here. I mean, look, because especially since Panthor's flocked, you need to be careful of this because you don't want to scrape off all your flocking. So that is a bit unfortunate. I would recommend being a little more careful than I was. Maybe use your thumb and press that down and see if you can slide the feet in there with out touching the top portion as much as you can. But again, it's a bit harder to get Skeletor seated. It can be done. But his feet are bigger and they're shaped weird, and it's just one of those things that you're going to have to be very careful of, because I don't want to see you guys totally scratch the flock off the top of your Panthor, which I already started doing on mine. In fact, let me put this saddle back on. If I come back over to Battle Cat, He-Man goes in and out of his trapdoor a lot easier, but I noticed that I got a little bit of paint scratch from He-Man's boot. You can see there's like the maroon color from his boot, the brown or whatever, scratched right on there. So that is something that you guys are going to want to be careful of if you want to make sure that these are like pristine and they don't have any scuffs or anything on your shelf. Be more careful than I was. Like I just took these guys and started jamming them in there just to see how it worked. And I didn't even think about that. And then I was kind of bummed when I noticed that I was scratching up the figure, specifically the flocking on Panthor. So that's my warning. I don't necessarily want to call it a nitpick, except for, I don't know, Skeletor could fit a little bit better, but these were the feet that were already on him. I don't know. I guess it is a nitpick. I guess if I had a complaint, that would be my one complaint. Otherwise, I think these are a lot of fun. And now I think it's time for a little bit of comparison time. I want to stand these guys alongside the vintage cats, just to give you a scale idea between these, so you can see how these new cats scale next to the larger cats from the vintage toy line. You can see that they look really good next to each other. The purple of the new Panthor is slightly different. It's a little deeper and darker on the vintage toy than this, but otherwise they look really similar to each other. Now, standing the cats alongside your vintage Mattel 5.5-inch He-Man and Skeletor is really something. I was just curious about this, and it's funny because it actually makes them a bit more accurate, like cat size, rather than being gigantic and everything. But whatever, it's Eternia. We want them to be gigantic. So you can sit them on their backs. They look a little funny. They look like they're riding tiny little cats. So that's what you get when you do a little bit of mixing and matching, mishmash, whatever you want to call it, in case anybody was curious what these new ReAction ones looked like alongside your vintage Mattel lineup. And that, my friends, is that. That is a look at your He-Man and Battle Cat and Skeletor and Panthor ReAction figures. I think these are a lot of fun, honestly. I really, really do. And I say this every time I review ReAction figures. I know these aren't for everyone, but they're not meant to be for everyone. They're definitely very niche for anybody that enjoys this aesthetic. I think Super7 has done an amazing job with their ReAction line. I know that there's a market that likes to collect these, and because of that, I am a bit bummed if these are, in fact, the final Masters of the Universe ReAction figures. Personally, I don't see why we can't have these right alongside the new Origins 5.5 line. I don't feel like they would really be competing with each other because there's a market for all of this stuff. But that's the way the toy world works sometimes. We'll have to wait and see if Super7 makes any more announcements on future Masters of the Universe product. So these went on sale kind of like a surprise. Right around the holidays, which is where I bought mine. I just bought mine right off of Super7's website. The day that I'm recording this, I saw that they put on social media that they only had a couple sets left. So they might be sold out at this point by the time you're watching this. So you're going to want to check other online retailers that carry Super7 product to see if you can track these down and add them to your collection. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, leave me a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, my friends.